dead of night. What are you doing out there in the dead of night? Demanded a voice. Alfred was lying on the floor of the palace library with a figure looming over him. He knew that voice better than his own. Nanny? Shh, she shushed. It is you. Yes, I know it's me. You know it's me. But we don't need the whole wide world knowing about it. What are you doing here? Asked the boy, scrambling to his feet. I asked first, replied Nanny. This lady must have a name, but everyone called her Nanny. The plump and cheery old girl was in her 80s. She was so old she'd been alive when there was sunlight over Britain, before the darkness came. Nanny had looked after 2 generations of royal children, the prince and his father, the king. As a result, she was one of the most trusted members of the royal household. Needless to say, Granny was the person you would least expect to see up to no good in the dead of night. Well, began Alfred, I was looking for something. What? I don't know. How can you look for something when you don't know what you're looking for? That's a good question, he replied. I think I'll know when I find it. Now, what are you doing here? Just browsing. Browsing? I'm looking for a book. What book? Nanny quickly changed the subject. Look at you! You'll catch your death! A sickly child like you, abseiling down Buckingham Palace, dressed only in your pyjamas. You must have gone bananas! Now come here, my little prince. The lady drew the boy close and gave him a big hug. Instantly, she could feel how cold he was. Alfred looked over her shoulder and saw that the Book of Albion was not in its usual place in the cabinet. Instead, it was on a pile of books on the small table. He thought that was strange, but said nothing. Oh, you're frozen solid, continued Nanny. We'll have to put you straight in a steaming hot bath. Now, come on. No, replied the prince. What do you mean, no? I haven't come this far to be put in the bath. Shower? No. Sink? No. Bidet? If you don't know what a bidet is, ask someone French. Or someone with a really stinky bottom. Or better still, someone French with a really stinky bottom. No! Barked the boy. Why on earth would he need a bidet at this moment in time? I'm looking for an answer, stated Alfred. An answer to what? Asked Nanny. To why my mother was taken to the tower? Nanny shook her head and tutted. Oh, yes, I heard your poor mother being dragged away, shouting and screaming. She was. I tried to stop the guards. You did? Asked Alfred. Oh, yes, I gave them a piece of my mind, and no mistake, even jumped on the back of one. What happened? The old lady shook her head sorrowfully. I was no match for them. Must have been 6 of them taking her off. They threw me to the floor. Oh, no. Nanny, are you all right? Black and blue I am, she said, rubbing her arms. But Nanny's a tough old bird. I will survive. She smiled, showing off her false teeth that went clickety-clack whenever she spoke. Do you believe Mama could really be a traitor? Nanny sighed heavily. It seems far-fetched, but you never know. Sometimes the enemy is closer than you think. This sent shivers down the boy's spine. What do you mean? He asked. I mean, maybe, just maybe, it's true. Alfred felt sick at the thought. Mama, a traitor? Now, come on, my little prince. You're not a well boy. You need to get straight to bed, and double helpings of Nanny's special eggy weggy in the morning. Alfred gulped. He didn't much like Nanny's special eggy weggy. Even though he'd been given them every single day of his life, He didn't have the heart to tell her. There were no fresh eggs in the palace, or indeed anywhere anymore. So these scrambled eggy weggies were made with powdered egg. They tasted funny. Funny peculiar, not funny. Haha! It would be weird if eggs tasted hilarious. I am not going to bed, announced the boy. Before yawning, the events of the night had left him absolutely shattered, but he was determined to fight on. Yes, yes you are. Straight to bed, young man, and no arguing. But suddenly, Nanny stood very still. A noise had distracted her. She brought her finger up to her lips to silence him. Then, with her eyes, she indicated the door at the far end of the library. Alfred tiptoed to it and then bent to look through the keyhole. Nanny was right. There was someone, or rather something, out there. He put his little eye up to the keyhole and found a giant eye staring back at him. The boy gasped. Shh! Shushed Nanny, as quietly as she could shush. The all-seeing eye was hovering outside the door. Alfred felt a wave of fear crash over him. He didn't move, and eventually the eye hovered off down the long corridor. Alfred waited until it was safe distance away, before tiptoeing past the shelves and shelves of books back to Nanny. Who was it? She whispered. It was the eye, whispered Alfred. Ah, I can't bear that big nosy beach ball. I once caught it spying on me when I was on the lavvy. Dirty blighter. Did it see you? I don't know, said the boy with a gulp. Well, did it or didn't it? She pressed, clearly concerned. I don't know. Maybe? Maybe, she fretted. Then maybe we'll both be sent to the tower. We need to get out of here, and fast. Should I go back the way I came in? The window? No, snapped Nanny. You were lucky the guards didn't see you. Someone scaling the wall at the palace at night. You could have been blasted here to Timbuktu. Then how? Just then, they heard the handle of the door to the library turn. Click. Someone about to march in. Chapter 7 of The Beast of Buckingham Palace by David Walliams, narrated by me. Chapter 7 The Room with No Doors. The old lady grabbed the prince by the hand. So he was standing right next to her at the library fireplace. Before Alfred could ask Nanny what she was doing, she turned the little hand to the gold carriage clock on the fireplace, anti-clockwise. And as by magic, the pair was spun into another room. Whoosh! I never knew this room was here, hissed Alfred. Shh! Shushed Nanny. They might still hear us. They listened out for voices in the library next door, and as they stood in the tiny, windowless room full of junk, there was a rusty metal bath, a broken bicycle, a dog-chewed cricket bat, a weather-beaten picnic basket, a mouldy croquet set, and a battered old Victorian pram with a wonky wheel. Alfred had been all over the palace, but he had never been in here. Hardly surprising, as the room had no door. Is this a secret room? He whispered. Shh! Shushed Nanny. There were a couple of old, chipped cut-glass tumblers on a side table. Nanny picked up one and passed the other to the boy. She then placed the top of the tumbler to the wall, and the bottom to her ear. Alfred followed suit. Next door, they could hear someone pacing around the library. Who was it? What were they looking for? Whoever it was, and whatever they were looking for, at last it sounded like they found it. After a short while, the pair heard the library door close. They were safe, for now. In answer to your question, my little prince, began Nanny, legend has it that there are many secret rooms and passages all over Buckingham Palace. I know of just a few. They must have been built here during World War II. Yes, for the royal family back then, in case the stinker Hitler invaded. King George VI. Oh, my little prince, you've been reading all those books piled up in your bedroom. History books are my favourite. I know. George VI had a wife and 2 daughters, continued the boy. The elder one became Elizabeth II. Full marks, clever clogs. Elizabeth II, what a ruler she was. We'll never see her like again. Prince Alfred, who was next in line to the throne, nodded his head sorrowfully. He knew more than anyone of his failings. If only he could be more like the great kings and queens of the past. But nature had played him a cruel trick. He was a sickly child. All of a sudden, Alfred thought he saw something move under an old dust sheet. With his eyes, he indicated the pile. Nanny mimed. What? Whatever it was, moved again. Nanny nodded and began tiptoeing over to the sheet. The boy stayed close behind her. Holding on to a cardigan for dear life, the sheet rose up into the air. It looked like a ghost. Alfred wanted to scream, but he didn't make a sound. The thing stretched out its arms. Nanny reached out her hand and closed her eyes. She couldn't bear it either. With one hand, she whipped off the sheet to reveal... That's the end of these chapters. Stay healthy, stay safe, and wash your hands. Bye-bye.